Episode 8 of Training Day with Coach Hawke. I have a very special guest with me, former two-time IWS World Heavyweight Champion, current IWS Tag Team Champion, and a good friend of mine. Folks, with me today, Black Dynamite, Jeremy Prophet. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic as always. Glad to be on here with a good friend of mine, someone who's been ever so gracious to me throughout the years, someone who's ever so knowledgeable about the business of professional wrestling. Definitely befitting of the name Professor H. And yeah, Jeremy Prophet, Black Dynamite, call me what you will. I'm just glad to be on here to be able to impart some knowledge to the students out there, and hopefully we'll have an entertaining time while we're at it.
I think we will. You caught me off guard, made me smile. I appreciate it. I definitely have, you and I have gone back quite some time. I can definitely say that I've been one of the Prophet guys since day one. And just to see how much success and how much you've been able to achieve is very inspiring. Maybe we can inspire some young minds in professional wrestling, some students. As you know, Training Day meant for professional wrestling students. So we're going to get right into it, Jeremy. My first question for you today is, where did you go to wrestling school and what was the experience like?
Yeah. Well, I started in 2003, September of 2003 to be specific, at Jacques Rougeau's wrestling school. And I had always wanted to be a wrestler, fell in love with the sport at a very early age, always knew I was going to get into it. Didn't know too much about the local scene, but I figured I'd find a way to get trained here, maybe, go out west and train with the Hearts, because that's all I really knew about when it came to Canada. Lo and behold, one of my best friends, his younger brother, who's a wrestler by the name of Paulie Platinum, still active in the wrestling business.
Shout out Paulie Platinum. We love that guy. Yeah.
He, told me Jacques Rougeau was taking a new class of wrestlers. I jumped on the opportunity right away. I think it was on maybe a Thursday. We talked about it. 2 days later, Saturday, I was there in class. And the rest pretty much writes itself. I spent a couple of years there, and here I am some 17 years later, still going strong and still contributing to the wrestling business.
Yeah, and doing a hell of a job at it while you're at it too. So that's cool to hear. Second question is really what I am interested in hearing from you. Because you're in fantastic shape and you've been in phenomenal shape for years and years now. Probably one of the first guys in the scene to actually have a body. So Jeremy, my second question for you is, what do you do to stay in ring shape physically and mentally?
Well, I would say my journey to being in shape really started with sports. So before I ever got involved in professional wrestling, like I said, in 2003, started my training, I always played sports. So I played hockey since I was 6 years old, played baseball since I was 5 years old. I did track and field. I did all kinds of sports. And I think that that's what helped me build the foundation of my body, because I always wanted to be in shape for those sports. And also, especially with hockey and with track, there was a certain demand for cardiovascular conditioning.
Of course.
And so that's where, I guess my great in-ring cardio comes from, is years and years and years of doing this. Some people will look at me and they'll think that I just became this way overnight or over the course of a couple of years. I always get guys coming up to me at the gym saying, how long have you been training? And then when I tell them it's been 15 years of training, they're really taken aback by that. But I knew that if you want to go anywhere in the wrestling business, an important selling point is your physique, is what you look like. Someone sees someone on a poster. They don't know what their wrestling ability, their work rate is like. They don't know what their promo sounds like, but they can see what their physique looks like. And that's a selling point. So I always knew, with the high aspirations and ambitions that I had in wrestling, I need to look the part. So I just made it like a full-time job. And, if I could give advice to the people out there, it would be, if you want to get in shape, you got to treat it like a job. You got to treat it like if you don't go and work out, it's like you're not getting paid, just like if you don't go to work. So that was my approach to getting in shape. And the rest has just been consistency. It's been not taking days off. Much like with my career, I've been blessed and fortunate to have never sustained an injury in 15, 16 years of doing this. Never had an injury, never had any burnout or wanting, desire to want to take time off. I would wrestle every day if I could. I've been fortunate enough to do tours where, I got to do 30 shows in 30 days, Sunday to Sunday, sometimes doing multiple matches. I'm not to say I'm an Iron Man or anything like that, but I just feel
I'll say it. I've seen you go for an hour at a time.
Well, I kind of meant more in the sense
I'll say it.
like how Cal Ripken Jr. was an Iron Man in baseball, for example, how he had that long consecutive streak of playing games and whatnot. Not to say that I'm that, but I mean, I think have built a solid enough foundation through my athletic career before wrestling, and then consistently training, eating properly, doing those things to help build enough muscle mass and shock absorption to be able to wrestle a style that I enjoy, that's pleasing to the fans, that's still fairly high risk, but also one that doesn't put me in danger because I've built a solid foundation to be able to do that kind of thing. And, you know, I never looked at it as it being a super ability or anything, but when I take the time to reflect on it, like now in the midst of a pandemic where I haven't wrestled over the course of more than a year, longest break I've ever had, it's like, wow, you know, I guess I am really durable to have been able to do this and not sustain any injury, no broken bones, no concussions, brain fully intact. And, you know, by the grace of God, I'm still here in one piece, functioning as good as ever.
So, you go to the gym, let's say, okay? What is on the agenda for you? I mean, I'm sure you do various kinds of workouts, but are you a longer rep type person? Are you a lift heavy weight type person? Like what are we doing CrossFit here? Like, is it different kinds of training? More specifically, what does your fitness regime look like other than like the sports, for example?
So it's been a long journey because when I first started, I felt like I was a very small guy. You know, I was 16, 17, 5'8" and 175 pounds at the time, which I felt was small, but I know a lot of people, they started from further back. You know, I grew to be 5'10" and a half, you know, over the course of puberty and whatnot. And yeah, and then managed to add on some muscle mass. But at first I was really just training for size. So I was going with low reps, heavy weights. Eventually I started training more for the wrestler look, if you will. So that involved incorporating more dynamic types of training, higher reps, cardio as well, which I was totally averse to because I naturally had very good cardio. So it never really was something that I said, you know, I'm going to work on this as well. But my mentality as my career started growing became train my strengths as much as my weaknesses. So I included a regimen of cardio. I included doing higher reps, doing different types of movements. I usually like to stick to working 1 to 2 body parts per day. But again, I'm very open-minded to different types of training, not necessarily CrossFit, but cross training. I actually have a trainer, probably the best trainer in the city, a man by the name of David Sisko, a former Olympian in Taekwondo. He runs a gym, Sisko Gym, great team of coaches. And he's helped me a lot using the Olympic form of training. He's a certified member of the IOC. And so I've adapted a lot of that into my training, more or less cross training. And as with any kind of training, nutrition is also a very important part of that. So I know a lot of people, they put in the hours in the gym, but you also have to be eating in accordance to that so that your body can recover and that you can also develop the right amount of muscle mass recovery and the aesthetic as well. And one thing I'm very proud of, and I'm not ashamed to say, is I'm also 100% natural, 100% steroid free my entire life. Nothing like that in the cocktail whatsoever. I do believe in nutritional supplements and proteins, creatines, those kinds of things. But I've been 100% natural, steroid free. Like Lance Storm used to say, the best built athlete this side of a negative drug test.
I love that. That's pretty good. And yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got the look to you. You've got the cardio to you. I've seen you go for over an hour. All this. So without those shortcuts, I think that the consistency that you mentioned earlier was really key to keeping that together. And you mentioned you have a trainer and then nutrition as well. I would recommend for wrestling students to get with a nutritionist if you're not too informed about nutrition. Start that sooner rather than later. As you said, it's a journey, a consistent one that does not happen overnight. So if I'm a wrestling student, I really do want to make it, as you did have those aspirations. I talk about treating our body.
And still do.
Absolutely. I think of our bodies as our tools of the trade. If you're a mechanic, you have your wrenches and your mechanic tools, and you want to keep them in good working order, right? You don't want to let them rust over. You don't want to let them break. You want to keep them together. And that's kind of our body now, right? Like being pro wrestlers, our body is as much of a tool as it is a visual element to help get us on the poster, right? So that's perfect. And let's move on to question number 3, which is my favorite question.
Okay.
Jeremy Prophet, you encounter a time genie. Now the time genie will take you back in time to your first day of pro wrestling training. you're allowed to give yourself one piece of advice. You don't know if you will take it or not. And before anything else can happen, before time shenanigans can happen, you get ripped out of the timeline and back to the present time. You have one piece of advice that you can give to yourself on your first day of professional wrestling training. Jeremy, what is that and why?
Well, it's something that I've only recently realized. And I think that if I today could go back, I would have the perfect advice for me on the first day that would probably catapult me to a much bigger stratosphere in this business. Unfortunately, it maybe would have not given us the opportunity to be here today and to be here for all the students out there. So hopefully I can touch some lives, and this path that I've chosen will be one that can be ultimately beneficial. All that to say, once we take out the metaphysical and whatnot, if I could go back, the advice would be simple. Bigger than any battle that we do in the ring, our battle to be recognized because of where we're from is something that I think a lot more people in Canada should realize.
Absolutely.
Because the fact is that the path that a lot of people follow in this business of putting in the work, making the drives to the towns, putting on good matches, working on your body, all of those things, it is not necessarily as important as being known and being recognized. And that's been my struggle, since this pandemic, which has been, I have all these tools. I have far more tools in my toolbox than many people out there. Again, I don't want to sound braggadocious, but when it comes down to it, I've been a firm believer in always working on my skills, strengths, and weaknesses to be the most complete wrestler. But the real battle we have as Canadians is to be able to overcome the American border.
Right.
We don't have the luxury of being able to easily cross and get booked in major promotions. And we know how it is in the business. We know that there are top promotions throughout the United States, the PWGs, GCW, I could go on and on. But we can't go there. We run the risk of facing potential sanctions, bans, all these kinds of things.
Crazy
and then
amounts of fines. Crazy fines. Yeah.
And that'll set our career back way more, even more than an injury. And so when it comes down to it, if I could go back and tell myself on day one of wrestling school some advice, I would say, start from today, start applying to be an American citizen, start, doing something like that, because realistically, it doesn't matter how talented or how good you are if nobody knows who you are. People need to know who you are, and not having the luxury of crossing the border on a regular basis. How are you going to catch the eye of a top company?
So not who you know, but sorry, not what you do, but who you know. Right?
But who you know. Exactly.
Right. Well, I think that's a fantastic piece of advice for what it's worth. And just to blow some smoke up your ass real quick, because I like you as a person and as a wrestler for real. I think you've done a hell of a job as it is. You've wrestled some of the top wrestlers all over the world. You've made yourself a pretty decent name as is. Obviously, there's always more, and we're always looking to the future and to greater and bigger accolades. And we obviously, you have a goal that you want to achieve, and I very much respect that. But like you said, it's consistency. It's consistency, and you've been consistent at it. And I believe that if you continue to put in the same amount of work, that's going to pay off eventually. There's no way it doesn't. And I think it's not a matter of if, Jeremy, it's a matter of when for you.
I think that in my case, it is exactly that. It's that more people just need to know who I am. And that's why I'm happy to, come on here, share my thoughts with the world. You and I infamously had a conversation a little while back where you said that, you look at the guys who are the top guys now, it's ones who are able to market themselves, get themselves out there on the internet, get people talking about them. And honestly, that was a light bulb moment for me. And that comes from you. You had said, you got to make sure people know who you are. So that's been my crusade, much like with working on my body, working on my in-ring ability, all those things. It's just about letting people know, hey, there's this, really talented performer out there that, would be a first round draft pick and future Hall of Famer under certain circumstances, just, hasn't been discovered yet.
I mean, I agree. And, when it comes to you, like you spoke about your weaknesses and working on those weaknesses. And I think that the social media aspect of just being known, especially in the industry now, maybe it wasn't as much so when we started, 2003, what have you, but it feels to me like, look at the studio you got behind you that's been built over the course of the pandemic. You've been working on that weakness, and it's only a matter of time before you turn it into a strength. Folks, I have been here with Jeremy Prophet, Black Dynamite, call him what you will, but call him one talented professional wrestler. If you don't know who he is yet, open your eyes, pay attention, because I'm going to put the full endorsement onto Jeremy Prophet right now. Somebody who I have worked with, somebody who I have hired, somebody who I've had the pleasure of knowing and being friends with for quarter decade now, right? Like 15, easily 20 years at this point. extremely talented professional wrestler. Jeremy, I want people to know who you are. So let's get some plugs in. Where can people see you on the internet?
Okay. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Prophet. That's JeremyProphet. You can find me on Instagram at The Real Jeremy Prophet.
The Real.
Exactly the same way. The Real. You can also see me every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on Jofo in the Ring. It's my podcast that I host. A lot of great guests on there. We've had many members of the IWS roster, like Sexy Eddie, Bob the Animal Anger, the Green Phantom, Frankie the Mobster, tons of great wrestlers on there, and a mix of everything, a little mix of comedy, insight, pretty much all of that. I'm just, again, trying to expand my social media brand as much as possible, be seen in as many places as possible, because like you said, that was a missing piece of the puzzle that now I want to be able to harness, if not weaponize, and be able to have that following to complement what I bring to the table in a wrestling performance. So hopefully, we can get the likes up, get the views up on pretty much everything I touch, so I can have that social media Midas touch. And, you put out a great product here as well. So I want to be able to get those eyes on it and help to expand your brand and everyone I come into contact with.
Hell yeah, man. Well, Jeremy, for the IWS and for the IWS Training Center, I thank you on behalf of both of those entities. Folks at home, at IWS Hardcore on every single platform, www.youtube.com/IWS Hardcore. Plenty of free wrestling, including some Jeremy Prophet matches, which are pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. Folks, this has been Training Day with Coach Hawke. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.